Hi, welcome to second Fark Talks of the year. I'm Arzu Tekir, founder and CEO of Urban Night Venture, growth consulting firm helping urban tech companies transform cities. Today, I'm gonna moderate the panel with another head of mine. I am the advisory board member of Fark Labs. Fark Labs is the future design center focused on mobility and life sciences located in Istanbul. And today's topic is micromobility. We will discuss how it can help make our cities more sustainable, why we must invest in it. I'd like to share why we picked this topic for a few minutes while we are waiting for the attendees. How many people are there? Oh, 12 is coming. And especially during the pandemic, as a private mobility solutions, e-scooters have become a mainstream part of daily travel for citizens in the metropolitan areas worldwide. Across Europe, the US and Asia and in Europe, e-scooters are available in around 700 cities in more than 50 countries. The rapid expansion of e-scooters clearly shows the popularity of micromobility with users. Although e-scooters are seen as the future way in urban commuting, the growth has led to several problems, like irresponsible users who park their scooters outside of the designated areas and traffic safety concerns. These concerns discourage some city managers from integrating the solution into urban mobility systems. One of the most effective problems e-scooters promises to solve is making public transport more accessible and more efficient. Micromobility can help with reducing car usage and parking congestion. As a side note, I like to share in Istanbul, more than 30% of traffic congestion caused by the drivers parking their cars. And governments are struggling to keep up with the sudden wave of electric scooters. But if there is one thing we can learn from the many cities where e-scooters have launched, it is that these aren't just the gadgets, they are real transit options for a lot of people. Now, let me introduce our distinguished speakers. First, Ellen Zhang, founder and co-founder and CEO of Beam. Beam is the largest shared micromobility operator in Asia Pacific. Welcome, Ellen. It's a bit late in Singapore, but thank you for being with us today.
Hello, Arzu. Thanks for having me.
And our second guest is Lukasz Skarka, VC Investment Principal of InnoEnergy.
Hi,
welcome, Lukasz. You are joining us from Eindhoven, Netherlands, right?
Today I'm in Krakow. I went to my family.
Krakow, oh, how nice. InnoEnergy is accelerating sustainable energy innovations. And our last panelist is Çağrı Selçuklu, co-founder and CEO of That, as one of the successful startups spun from Fark Labs. That is a micro-mobility infrastructure solution. Welcome, Çağrı.
Hi, Arzu. Thanks for having me. And hi, Ellen, Lukasz. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you all. Now let's get started. Let me start with the first questions. And my first question is to you, Ellen. Which cities are the best fit for the micromobility? Let me start with this question. And Seoul is the largest market for the shared scooters globally, and Beam is one of the largest players there. Can you share the pros and cons of implementing micromobility in small, mid-size, and mega cities?
Great question. So Beam is operating in 4 countries in Asia. So we're currently operating in Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and Malaysia. And there's a really broad range of cities that we're in. So we're in cities as large as Seoul, which is one of the largest cities in the world. It's actually 26 million people and probably one of the largest shared scooter markets in the world. And we're also operating in some very small cities. In Australia, we're in 2 cities called Bunbury and Townsville, both of which I've never been to or heard of before Beam. And the population is around 170,000 people. The exciting thing is we find that Beam actually works, shared scooters actually work in all these places. And in small cities, we operate a fleet of something like 200 to 300 scooters. And in Seoul, we have a fleet of over 20,000 scooters. And in all these places, we find that the demand is very good and the operational, usage is very high.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alan. It's a good start. My last second question is to Lukasz. Lukasz, I like to get your point of view about micromobility investments. And my question is to you is that there was a long debate on how profitable the shared mobility operators. Lime reported the first good quarter in the last November 2020. And from an investor point of view, can you share an outlook on micromobility investments and what we should expect soon on the micromobility investments in the near future?
Yeah, sure. Great question, and happy to share my thoughts. I guess I would distinguish first of all the investment and the group of companies being shared micromobility companies and all the others. And I guess while we've seen a wild growth of all the sharing companies in recent years, in recent dozens of months, I'm very happy that some of them are showing positive results. I guess right now they're focusing on something that's really important, which is the unit economics or the economics itself and not the growth anymore. I think that as a paradox, COVID has sort of been a catalyst of that, meaning that they needed to focus on how to operate efficiently, how to operate economically, as opposed to how to quickly grab the market. But in my opinion, the more interesting part of the micromobility or the mobility market itself, especially in terms of investment, is all that surrounds those companies. I would say there are 4 subgroups of that. First one is everything and anything that goes into helping the shared companies achieve operational operational efficiency, increase the efficiency of their operations. Second of all, everything and anything that creates the business more sustainable from the start till the second life of the vehicles, of the batteries, of the fleet. Third thing is there are more jobs to be done than just running around on a scooter, right? So I guess companies that find the jobs around mobility to be done also in sharing companies will prevail and will be interesting for investors. And the fourth thing, which is coming out pretty rapidly right now, is the new forms of transportation, new devices. We focus on scooters, we focus on e-bikes, especially in 2020, but there's more and more, and there will be more modes of transportation because, as you said, the transportation needs to be inclusive, needs to be universal, and needs to be available for everyone. So also the elderly, also the disabled, and not just to young, hip people that can ride a scooter. That's my thought.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm also looking forward to hearing about what's next is coming for the urban mobility. And after having investor point of view, an operator's point of view, I like to ask Çağrı Selçuklu. Çağrı, you are the infrastructure solution provider. I can tell that, and I read one of the interviews that you gave, and you founded DAC to address 3 challenges in integrating micromobility in cities. These are first local leadership and the public space. The second one is operational efficiency, and the third one is mobility as a service integration. So can you elaborate on these challenges and how do you address this and what is your irresistible offer?
Yeah, of course. When I think this is the juicy side of the story. When we first started doing this around 1.5 years ago, I guess, we didn't start this by saying, okay, let's make charging stations. Or we didn't start saying, let's have an infrastructure solution for micromobility. We, as you mentioned, we started looking into this 3 groups, but these 3 groups was defined by looking into all the stakeholders that are involved in the market, not only micromobility, but in mobility in urban environment in general. Why did we do that? Because instead of defining a product and trying to make the best out of it, I think it is important to understand what is the demand behind that product. So when we look into the space, we read around, I think, 50, 60 regulations back then. And all of the regulation studies, the prototypes back then, was almost always focused on giving tickets on bad behavior rather than benefiting from the good behavior, because cities didn't know what to do about this development, right? It was developing very fast and they didn't catch up. So they were trying to create some bans around it, which means that they do want that solution in the city, but they want to keep it under control, but they are not in contact in any how the operations are going in the city day to day. So we realized there's a huge stakeholder there which owns the land, which operates the land, regulates the land, that cannot become a part of this. The second group was the sharing operators. This is improving insanely through time right now. Back then when we started, I think the scooters had like 4 or 5 months lifespan. Right now it's more than 2 years. But imagine that time when we looked into this space, it was more than 50-60% of their profit, all these operators, were being spent on operation and charging alone. And that's a big pain for a company, right? Because especially during the pandemic period, we realized that efficiency and sustainability is very important for any business model. And in micromobility, there is few companies that are showing profit. So this is the important place to attack and then diminish where you spend a lot of money. And then the third group we looked at was the end users, the people in the city. And if you're living in a city that is more than 1 million, Elin just made a nice comment. They are operating in 2 cities that he didn't hear about before they started, right? So all these cities need this demand. But when you're in a city where there is a lot of scooters, you realize there is this huge integration problem. These vehicles can be everywhere, but they're not where they're supposed to be. There's huge vandalism open to all the fleet vehicles because they're out there and there's no protection, basically. And it is on the public's right of way. So how can we solve all these things? That was the question that we asked ourselves a year and a half ago. That led us to the infrastructure solution. And let me finish with one more comparison. We are coming from automotive. We have that automotive reflex, and we're carrying that knowledge into what we're doing right now. Distributed charging solution is not a new thing. When you compare it with cars, there's in cities right now, there's roads, there's rules, there's defined parking places. People are used to these vehicles. Sadly, they are not mostly shared. And we know how to charge them. We know how to put gas in them. These are all things that we are used to. But when you look into micromobility, there is no roads that are defined. There is no rules that are defined yet fixed globally. People are not used to these vehicles. As Lukasz said, not many people are able to use them yet, so there will be new modes and modes. These are open to vandalism because they are mostly shared. So charging is one of the problems to solve. But the full integration, there's going to be a lot other things to be done along the way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from there, I like to ask the traffic safety concerns, actually. There is, the bike lanes we have. Some cities have, some cities don't. So that's why it is not so easy to integrate bike to other transport modes. But it is similar to micromobility, the same challenge we have. And some of the, municipality officials or some cities hesitate to implement micromobility solutions due to these traffic safety concerns. So what would your answer? How can we address the micromobility related traffic safety concerns?
I think from this point on, Elin would have a great answer for this question in his experience on the field too. But I need to add, I see these newly developed markets, newly developed solutions, whatever it is, and now we're talking micromobility and mostly scooters, right? Mm-hmm. It is very similar to what internet is, right? Internet is a good thing. Because of that, we are going through 2020 and 2021 right now. But there's a lot of people who is using it badly. So I think it depends on who is using these solutions in what sense. So infrastructure, make the best one, it will not be the solution. Make the best vehicles to be used, make the best investments, have the perfect city with the infrastructure. As long as the end user is not educated towards using it in the right way, it will never be the best case scenario. But there's a lot of work for us to be done, all 3 partners here. We need to provide the best quality products. We need to provide the more stakeholder approach solutions rather than one singular solution that is aggressive out in the market, but with collaborations. And we need to work with the stakeholders in a way that these things are much better integrated. Let me give you an example. Right now, one of my personal experiences, I know for a fact that in Paris, in central areas, I can take a ride from anywhere to anywhere only by using designated roads. And I feel safe about it. Because of that, I use more safely and according to the rules. When there is none of those, people try to make their own solutions and they get out of the way. And all of a sudden, this new thing is a dangerous thing, right? Arzu? Okay.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Thank you for the great answer. Exactly. I agree with you. Now I am asking the same questions. First, Alan, then Lukasz. And Alan, how do you respond to this?
Hi. This is a very good question. And I think there's a few ways to kind of think about safety. The first is there is definitely a huge onus on the user, and educating users and also providing a good environment for users to be able to use these vehicles safely. So any vehicle that is motorized or even non-motorized has potential to be dangerous. For example, one of the most dangerous things you can do in a car is drive drunk. And so drunk driving is illegal essentially in every country. And if you are ever caught driving a car drunk, it's a very serious offense. Similarly, driving a scooter drunk is also very dangerous. And while you can catch someone driving a scooter drunk the same way you catch someone driving a car drunk by seeing them on the street, and there are certainly arrests made in a lot of the countries that we operate in by police. We actually have even better tools than automobiles. So for example, there's actually an accelerometer inside the scooter that can detect whether someone is driving erratically. That doesn't exist in cars. And so that is actually an ability to detect drunk driving in a better way on scooters than there even is with existing car technology today. So that makes micromobility really exciting because a lot of these vehicles actually have a lot more powerful safety features than existing automobiles today. Another one is these vehicles are, frankly, they are new. Anytime there's a new device, there's also a propensity to, not understand how to use them. We found that a lot of through research, a lot of the majority of accidents actually happen from new users. And so we actually have a program on Beam, on the app called Beam Safe Academy, where actually we teach you how to use a scooter more safely. And then by going through that course, you actually get some free credits so that people who are new to a scooter can learn how to use it and ride more safely the first time. We also have half beam mode. So if someone is more concerned about going too fast on a first trip, they can actually limit their own speed. So the first time they ever sign up with a beam, they can say, hey, do not let me go at higher than 10 kilometers an hour. And limiting that speed also makes it easier to learn how to ride a scooter. So there's a lot of these features, and I can go on and on, but there's many, many features that we can do to make these vehicles safer. And it's much smarter and more effective in the ramp up process and controls that we can put onto users versus cars. Maybe one more thing I'd like to talk about is geofencing. So every scooter has an IoT device on it that locates the like where it is in a city. So we can have geofences where areas with high pedestrian traffic, you can actually limit the speed of a scooter or even prevent scooters from being ridden in those areas. And so that also helps with safety.
Okay. And I'm going to add Lukasz. Lukasz, this type of headlines you can see on the newspapers and magazines is a bad PR and bad, marketing for the micromobility, I guess. So how do you, address these traffic safety concerns as a VC point?
Yeah, sure. So the VC, for everyone to know, is a venture capitalist. So as a capitalist, I'm going to say the market is going to decide, right? The people are going to decide, the money is going to decide in the end. But having said that, I think we should focus on two things, and Alan and Chare rightfully pointed out that it's a new technology. So as with everything that's new, you have to learn from the beginning, right? You learn to ride a bike, you learn to ride a car. In a car, you get certified to do it. You need to pass an exam, right? Because it's a heavy vehicle. With a scooter, usually, with the exception of the good companies like Beam that help the new onboarded people start riding the vehicle, usually people don't learn how to ride a scooter, right? They just jump on it and assume that they're going to know how to do it. It's not true, first of all. So you need to get acquainted with the device. You need to get acquainted with the speed, which is quite significant, and you need to learn how to ride it from the beginning. And also the environment, the broader environment needs to get to know how to watch out for those vehicles, how to ride a bike next to them, how to walk on the pavement, like not to get distracted by them. So that's one thing. The technology is adapting, and the cities and the civilians are also adapting to it. Unfortunately, the scooter itself, as I said before, and I think it's true, is not fit for everyone. So we need to have different vehicles. Like e-bikes are usually easier to ride for people that are of higher age, and there's going to be more and more different devices, like maybe free wheels, maybe pods. Like it's going to be a little bit easier because the job is going to be made easier for you by using a different device. But I want to still point out to one thing. When I said it's a new technology, incrementally, the safety is a lot higher than it was for the car. Like, first of all, when the car started, there were also a lot of hesitations, as opposed to going on by foot or going on a horse, basically. The car was perceived as a deadly device by people, and rightfully it was. And there was a lot of background work done by big corporations like GM in order to build roads and in order to get people to really be willing to allow cars on the roads, let's speak. But incrementally, micromobility has a higher standing point. It's a lot safer. It's a lot easier to manage for the user and for the sharing company and for the city itself. So that's a good starting point.
Okay, I'm going to continue with the challenges of implementing micromobility. So my question, let me continue with you, Ellen. One of the main challenges that I see here, governments are not able to keep up with the new technologies and new technology companies. So they are not fast enough to develop regulations and build capacity in the offices. And the other challenges is insurance cost is so high, as far as I'm noticed. So sometimes brand value of the mobility operators, I mean, all the credit goes to, brands, micro-mobility operators. So it can become another challenge for the municipalities. So can you share your experience and Asian cities' perspective on this topic?
Great question. So Asia is actually a very interesting region. It's super, super diverse. So the types and pace of regulation in a lot of different countries varies a lot. So we're in some places where regulations have moved much more quickly. And Korea is one of those places where the technology adoption rate for technology in general is just really, really fast. It was actually one of the first places where social networks were invented, even before Facebook. And so adoption for scooters has been really fast, and regulation has also kind of evolved at a very fast pace to keep up with how quickly it's growing. And there are other places like Australia and New Zealand, which are also very embracing of micromobility, but are also tender-based markets. So every city to enter is actually a government tender, and then it's limited to 2 or 3 operators. And I think that's maybe similar with a number of European cities. And then there's also a different approach in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And so the breadth of these regulatory conversations is very, very broad. What we try to do is we try to synthesize what works well in multiple cities and then kind of cross knowledge exchange between cities to suggest what potential smart regulations can look like. For example, Korea has some of the most strict parking regulations, and Australia has some of the most strict safety regulations. And so our experience with interacting with regulators who care very deeply about these two issues, and then we help exchange between these other cities, also helps us to advance discussions more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Charu. Let's continue with you. And can you give us a comparison between the cities like Paris, Istanbul, and now you are in New York City as well, right?
Yeah. Let me start with the something that I realized for the last 1.5 years when we were talking, especially working on the B2G side. I think starting from startups all the way up to companies, people need to more and more understand the big differences between B2B and B2G, but also the similarities. Differences are very more obvious ones, but the similarity is that even if you're doing a B2G contract or a business development study, at the end of the day, you are in contact with a person. So when you break down the problem, the person that you are trying to develop this project is a person that are going through the day living in the same experiences with yourself in urban mobility side. So they realize that there is this things to change, things to improve, and they do want to do that. Well, of course, especially in B2G, the system is slowing this down, but I can see the frustration with the people that I'm working with to make this move forward, to catch up with the technology in the government side. So we did the exact same thing when we were defining our problems to solve, when we were developing our product. We break it down to the problem definition of how we can move forward with the B2G projects. And we came up with two very effective results. One of them is there is, at the moment, a lot of companies, utility companies, energy companies, that are already in the space, that are doing business with that government, with that local authority. And they are looking to create new compartments to their business, to jump into the new markets, right? They are looking to enrich their business models. And they already have the existing business contact with the government, which makes things easier and faster. So we started getting in contact with these companies because although we are providing infrastructure solution, we are not reinventing the definition of electricity. So there's companies that are doing this for hundreds of years. We start working with them that accelerated our approach or definition or creation of a project for a government. That's the first thing that we realized. The second part is you can only do so much innovation in your product, but you also create innovation in your business models. So what we did is that we created a business model called infrastructure as a service, where in the world that we're living in, everything is turning into a service because instead of buying things, now you're using services. So why not infrastructure is also a possibility to become a service that we can provide for people to pay per use, right? So in this service, what we're doing is that we're delivering our charging stations in city scale without asking any payment, working with the local authorities. In return, we are asking for an access for our products to be distributed in that city so that this city can use these solutions to regulate their space, right? And start making money by becoming a partner of a universal charging solution. There is a service for any micromobility vehicle in their city, which would be a great benefit for the operator as well, because they would have a safe access to a bigger market where they lower their operational costs and charging is for free. So I think these are the two factors that accelerated in terms of the challenges that we see in the market. But shortly, finishing up with the comparison, we developed a solution for a problem that is out there. Istanbul doesn't have this problem yet, but I think very soon they are going to have one. And because of that, we are having our conversations with in the aspect that I just described you, with the right stakeholders. to have a long-lasting, more sustainable approach rather than just having a corner covered with stations that looks pretty, but it should be a solution, right? So going to Paris, just as I described, we partnered with Engie, the biggest energy provider in Paris. And now with them, we're talking not only the strategy for Paris, but a strategy for France. Because I think that's the way that we need to create solutions when you're coming up a solution for an infrastructure standard. Because if something is in not scale that is delivered to people for them to benefit from it, it is not going to create the change that we are looking for. So that's why we're pushing in that front. And yes, you declared it earlier than I do. Right now, our first deliveries reached New York this week, across the ocean for the first time. Thank you. Our stations are going to be all across Manhattan, around Central Park. If you're going to be there, use some of our stations. This is a different business model than what we do in Paris. In New York, we are working with a business that's our B2B part, where we sell our stations as a consumer product so that you can build your business on top of it.
How many stations will you be?
Well, at the end, by June, there's going to be a little over 1,000 stations. And before the end of the year, there's going to be 5,000 stations in New York. And across North America, there's many more clients that we're going to deliver as well. But yeah, it's a big start. I think by the end of summer, we will be able to say that we are in New York, Paris, Berlin, London. But why not Seoul? I think we would talk with Ellen about this in the further ahead conversations as well.
Okay, great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Sorry for the advertisement, but the topic came up. I couldn't hold myself.
Okay, thank you, Çağrı. Let's continue with the equity and accessibility. So I would love to also point out this topic as well. So I'm a strong believer that all forms of disruptive and new mobility solutions, new technology solutions, and existing shared mobility alternatives should be equally provided to all people in the cities. So not just for the posh neighborhoods, as Lukasz said in earlier. So Çağrı, again, I like to continue with you. How do you comment on this? You know, you also mentioned about Paris municipality will install your 150 dock and log and charge points in Paris. So how do you plan and address this accessibility in the city?
Well, first of all, I need to point out the fact that we are doing something great here right now, right? We're talking with Arzu. You have WRI background. You know what the policies, the city, the mobility solutions, you know them by heart.
Yeah.
Ellen here, day by day, he lives that operation. Lukasz, a mobility investor, knows who is coming in, going out, and what is good for the economy of things. And we are in the infrastructure side, which brings most of them together. I think this is the real approach. This is the way of looking at things, and this is how it's supposed to be. But I'm not going to be the guy just jumping the line here by saying, because we are providing infrastructure, we are going to create equity and accessibility. No, we cannot do this by ourselves. We need to have partners that are looking towards this solution, local authorities or operators.
Okay, my question is about how do you plan? Which areas are you going to put your stations? So this is the basic question. Actually.
Of course. Well, in general, we believe that there is always going to be a hybrid solution, because dock-to-dock solution is in contrast with what we're calling first and last mile, right? Because if you're not being able to go to the last mile, it means that it is not the last mile solution, because you need to go to a certain destination. But when you have critical areas such as central locations, city central areas, shopping zones, mobility hubs, entertainment areas, or wherever there is a high density and low space usage, like high cost space usage, there should be a charging infrastructure that is strategically positioned. Why? Because operations are only going to be an extra load to those areas where you need, because the space is very valuable, you need to use them more efficiently. and that will help both the city, the people, and the companies, basically.
Okay.
But outskirts, when you need to go to other places, that is where you need other solutions. This industry for the last 2-3 years been trying swappable batteries and many other solutions, which are a good way to go for certain definition, but it needs to break down. What do you?
Okay,
that's how I see it.
Great. And Alan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think equity and accessibility is a super important topic, and it's something that is really important in Asia. So, for example, in Auckland, which is our biggest city in New Zealand, there's the part of the tender license requires us to split our fleet into 3 zones. Tier 1 is the city CBD, which is definitely the most trips, and then there's also a tier 2 and a tier 3 zone where we have to allocate vehicles to. We are profitable in all the zones, but tier 1 is definitely the most profitable. And the thing that gets me the most excited about micromobility is the fact that we're even able to be profitable in a tier 3 zone. And there's fundamentally, we believe there's a structural advantage to the micromobility space, which is more advantageous from a cost perspective than essentially any other form of mobility out there. And that's the fact that these vehicles are small and you drive them yourself. So the typical micromobility vehicle, whether that is an e-scooter or an e-bike or an e-moped, it's a single person, it's replacing a single person journey from point A to point B that you drive yourself. And the fact that it's on a vehicle that is sized for one person rather than a car, which is, if you're going somewhere by yourself, you're carrying 1,000 to 2,000 kilograms of metal around with you everywhere. And in fact, if you take a ride-hail vehicle, you actually are paying for another person to join you on that journey. That is a luxury service. And the fact that this is a self-driven vehicle where the capex of the vehicle is much cheaper, the per kilometer cost is way lower, is ultimately the real low-cost service. And there's micromobility companies get held to a very, very high standard of operation by investors to be profitable, by governments to operate in these multiple different types of areas. But we can do that, and it's profitable. And when there is enough capital and enough regulatory rollout to be able to have very, very large scale micromobility projects, I think that's going to be really exciting for cities. And we believe that in the future, maybe in the next 10 or even 5 years, there's probably going to be some cities with more micromobility vehicles in those cities than cars. And that's this is such a good way and such a low cost way of getting around and so effective.
Do you share which cities we will see more micromobility options than cars?
I maybe Seoul could be one of the first to get there, but I think in the next 10 years, I think the majority of cities may get there. And it's not just scooters, but it's just small vehicles, single person vehicles, which would be e-scooters, e-bikes, pedal bikes, mopeds, replacing a lot of these private vehicles, which just don't need to be that big.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And Lukasz, from a VC investor point of view, how do you approach this equity and accessibility? The companies you support and you invest in, they need to be profitable, but there is another social, aspect of this micromobility integration as well. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. For us as in energy as a VC, it's equally important. So not only the financial return is important, but we do also have a mission, and the mission is to bring to people energy that is cheaper, more accessible, or cleaner. And energy understood very broadly. So mobility is one of them. And having said that, like the social aspect, I would divide it into a couple of subtopics, again, because I'm a subtopic freak. One of them is the geographical aspect, the one that Chare and Alan touched by saying there's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 areas of the cities, and also cities itself. So the job to be done here is to create a situation where the neighborhoods that were usually overlooked are served in an equal way, so that people can have access to mobility services that would be able to grasp the same services that are in the posh neighborhoods or the central neighborhoods. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is the society itself. So the availability of the services and of the technologies should be the same for a baby boomer, for a millennial, for a retired person, and for a teenager, right? And there need to be more technologies on that front, definitely. But the ultimate goal is to get rid of internal combustion engines, and for that, we also need to, in the mobility and the micromobility sphere, we need to think about the lengths of trips and the lengths that people want to do, the jobs they need to do. They need to have the groceries, they need to go visit their family and things like that. So micromobility serves a part of this problem, but yet it doesn't serve the whole problem. It will serve a part of the market, but there are other things that need to be done in the longer trips that are taken by the people and will be taken by the people, of course. So micromobility is part of it. There is a reason why when people think about, let's say, electric vehicles, not only micromobility vehicles, they usually think that Tesla is the best one, or is the best selling one, which is not true. There's a Chinese brand that sold 200,000 vehicles in the first 200 days of their operations, and the vehicle is really small and it costs like $5,000 or $6,000, but it gets the job done, and it serves the longer trips that people cannot take or are not willing to take with a micromobility device, but they don't have the money, or they don't want to spend the money on a Tesla or any other premium car brand. So there's different aspects for that, and we could talk for days about this aspect. But for us as an investor, equality and accessibility is really important, and we're looking for solutions that for the puzzles that will fit this picture as well.
Okay, great. And before the Q&A session, I'm gonna ask the last question. Let's start with you, Lukasz. And what will be your message to the stakeholders to be better support micromobility or promote sustainable transportation modes in urban areas?
Yep, definitely. I see the role of stakeholders, the one that are in the question, as somebody who connects and listens and talks, basically. So as a middleman, essentially a middleman. So first of all, they need to talk to the people and listen to the either the groups that lobby or the groups that influence the policy, or the people themselves in the cities, because they are the most important. Essentially, the city is not a bunch of streets and not a bunch of cars or micromobility devices. It's the people that live in it. So they need to listen to the people, and they need to talk to the sharing companies, and also require them to, as Alan said, some of the cities already do, to support them in leveraging what some of the neighborhoods, some of the people, usually underprivileged previously, need to be done. That would be my message to the stakeholders. Listen and talk.
Okay, great. Listen and talk. Fantastic. And Alan, your messages.
Yeah, Lucas, I think I 100% agree. I think that's pretty much my message as well. I think that it's a really interesting space because it's so new and so different, and it impacts the cities so much. And we often at Beam talk about the stakeholders that we have involved in the business, and with most startups, the most important stakeholder is always customer obsession. Serve the customer. And for us, for micromobility, customer is really one party. The other two really important ones are community, which are the people who get impacted by scooters' existence, even if they're not riding a scooter. It might be it's parked in front of my apartment building, and a lot of people in my apartment building do not ride scooters. Or it's parking. I'm a cafe owner, and it's parked in front of my cafe. I don't like scooters in front of my door. Or I'm a pedestrian, and a scooter just drives by me really fast. And all of these are stakeholders that get impacted, and we have to engage with them as well. And the last one, of course, is governments, which are defining the regulations. And a lot of these times, these are kind of lagging, conversations. There isn't dedicated infrastructure for scooters or micromobility today. And a lot of cities are rushing to build as many bike lanes as possible. There was a day there, 100 years ago where there was no infrastructure for cars, but roads are now the single largest piece of infrastructure. So there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to get there. A lot of the conversations, as Lucas, you were saying, talk and listen, is how do we move these conversations forward in a collaborative way, and how do we fast forward to that future where ultimately micromobility, whether that's shared or on personal vehicles, is just so much more efficient from a cost and convenience perspective that it's going to replace cars in a very big way for specifically short distance trips that are happening by ourselves.
Çağrı, what would you like to add this?
First, I want to add that thank God we didn't have the whole conversation like this, because I have like many things to have interact right now. We would be here for hours, but we are in a very diverse location right now. I guess Arzu, you're in States, Ellen, we are in more central, and then there's like what, 12, 13, maybe 14 hours difference between us. So I'm going to keep it short. I really like the fact that we are breaking things down now, rather than just looking from the grand scale of things. Going back to the topic of our meeting, right? The advancing our cities in terms of sustainable future. The word micromobility is like 2-3 years old from the Wikipedia history. Even the word is new. And because it's a new industry, obviously it started with a lot of trial and errors. But I realize through the time, as Ellen put it also, like the development of the vehicle is going in a very much technological pull way, that it's moving forward ahead every month. But when you look into the cities, they are catching up too. And I really like to see that when they're breaking it down to the problem. Paris was the first messy area when everybody just rushed in with 20,000 something scooters, now down to 15,000 by regulations. Before you had this, I'm sorry, but really crappy scooters to use, and then they would break in months. But now you're using scooters where they realize in which street you entered, so that they limit the speed according to that street. So they're getting more smart. They're more divided down. That's why I'm calling it breaking it down. Now there's, in Paris, for example, again, because it's the most advanced situation, you cannot just end the ride anywhere. There's designated parking areas, there's speed zones and everything. So it's very much technologically handled, broken down. It's defined in the regulation. I think that is going to keep on happening. And I think not only as DACT, but these gentlemen here took a great position in that sense, being adaptive and being involved in all the changes that are happening. I think that's how we need to look at things as well. Like, it cannot be one solution for every city, or it cannot be one solution for every part of the city. We need to be more proactive, more break it down to every section. One last word, I read in a bulletin somewhere, I think the global market penetration of micromobility right now is around 3 to 5%. There is a lot more to do. So I think this break it down approach, this listen and talk approach, and this adaptation of all the stakeholders into the system is going to help us moving forward.
Okay, great. We already ended up our panel session 3 minutes late, not too bad. Now I have 3 questions. I'm going to get these 3 questions to you. Let's start with Yeşim Duman. Yeşim Duman asks, I'm really bothered by unsystematically parked scooters in the streets of Istanbul. Unfortunately, those supposed to be low carbon solution are now frustrating in the sidewalks. What will be the solution? Very short answer.
DACT.
Okay.
Is that short enough?
Okay. No more.
No, you cannot just make a station, put it in the street, and it won't be a solution. Of course, DACT is going to be a part of it, but we need to work with the city and the regulators and the operators, which we're doing right now. I think it will take a little more time, because Yeşim, it is, as I said, early days in Istanbul. I think it will be bigger, because when we're talking about problems in Paris, we're talking about for 2-3 million. Istanbul is what, past 15? So it will be a tremendous situation. So we need to take action right now, which we do.
Okay, Ellen, what would you suggest Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality.
Ellen saw Istanbul.
Yeah, I know. I know the story.
Yeah. So I think for Beam, we actually have a little bit of a different view, perhaps, than a lot of the early scooter sharing companies that operated in a 100% dockless way. We actually run what we call a virtual dock system, which essentially, through a system of nudges and incentives, has riders try to park scooters at designated locations. And our view is, when there's only 500 scooters in a city, it's very small, and it doesn't bother a lot of people. But when it gets to 5,000, it's going to start getting noticed. And if this is a form of mobility that we think is going to be bigger than cars, that we're talking 50 or 500,000 vehicles in a city, that has to be dock-based. It's not going to be free-floating. And essentially, at some point of size, that it is going to have much more defined locations. The largest form of mobility around the world, which is cars, there are no specific docks, so to speak, but they're actually dock-based. Cars everywhere in the world have to be parked inside white lines. They have to drive between the yellow lines. And a lot of that regulation and infrastructure just hasn't been built. So it's a little bit of a lagging thing, but it is eventually, I think, going to move towards that world.
Our founder, Fark Labs founder and Fark Holdings chair also, Ahu Sertar, asking this question. You already answered, but would you like to say something about Istanbul?
Oh, I think I think Istanbul's a very beautiful city. I wish I had more time to spend there. And I was very impressed by a lot of the micromobility operators there. And just tons of usage. Very nice lock 2 system. I think, which also has actually made the city I think neater than a lot of other cities. I know maybe the previous question was saying Istanbul was still a little bit messy, but I think it's the lock 2 system at least requires vehicles to be next to a piece of infrastructure rather than just in the middle of a street, which is another problem that a lot of other cities have. So I think it is a smart system that Marta has set up, and I think it's one step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is coming from Serhat Ince. Serhat asked, to make it efficient routes, charging locations has to be planned in line with cities' micro-transportation and traffic plan. Absolutely. So far, how prepared, open are the municipalities for micro-mobility? I think you answered this question.
Yeah, during the talk, but let me make a summary. They are very open. They are really much looking forward to have these solutions integrated to their mass solutions, or so that the people living in the city can reach to these vehicles easier and more efficiently. And adding on top of that, fundings, incentives, big initiatives that are also looking forward to support the cities so that the cities can roll out these kind of solutions as well. I think it's a matter of time. I remember when we first started and where we came now inside 1.5 years. It is very progressive. People told me what B2G is before we started this. We're having a better experience than what has been told.
Ellen, do you want to say something to this question? Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think the efficiency of adapting new infrastructure, new regulations, it is definitely something that different cities move at different paces. But overall, I would say the entire globe and a lot of places in Asia are actually moving really fast. If I can't imagine what type of conversations happened 100 years ago with cars and how gnarly some of those conversations were and how many years it took to get that infrastructure in place. But most of us on this call today probably have only seen a world where cars existed. And if we fast forward by even 10 years, I can maybe say that there's going to be a lot of people who can't imagine a world where a lot of that micromobility infrastructure didn't exist.
Yeşim, Ahu, and Serhat, thank you for the excellent questions. And now we are closing our panel. Lukasz, Ellen, Çağrı, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts with us and with the audience. And hopefully meet again and then do another round of conversation together with you. And please follow us on Fark Labs on Instagram, Twitter. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to everyone.
Have a great day. Yeah.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.